Hi, this is Dr. Thomas, math instructor at Lawson State Community College, and in this video I would like to show you how to change a quadratic function to standard vertex form. Now a quadratic function is f of x equals ax squared plus bx plus c. This is considered to be the general form of a quadratic function. Now sometimes people call this the standard form, and then they call the form that I call the standard form the vertex form. So that's why I'm going to call this form that you see right here call this form the general form. In this general form, a, b, and c are called the coefficients. And because this is a quadratic function that agrees to the graph will form a parabola, a U-shaped graph. Each graph will have either a maximum or minimum point called the vertex. And there is a line of symmetry which we can divide the graph into two halves. That is the line of symmetry. Again, the general form is ax squared plus bx plus c. The parabola will open up if the a value is positive, and it will open down if the a value is negative. Now the vertex. The vertex is the h and the k of the standard form. The vertex is considered to be the lowest or highest point of a parabola. So let me also remind you that the lowest or highest point is also called the minimum or maximum. Now let me rewrite the vertex form, or the standard vertex form I will call it. So it's a times x minus h squared plus k. So in this form here, the h and the k is the vertex. Now here's an example of a parabola to your right. Now notice that the green dot represents your vertex. And in this case, since our parabola opens up, the lowest point here is the minimum point. The axis of symmetry is represented by the equation x equals h. So if you were to divide this parabola in half, the x here will be x equals 2, and this little blue dashed blue dashed line here represents the axis of symmetry, and it's a little off, but it should be right on that 2 here. The vertex form again is f of x equals a times x minus h squared plus k. Now let's try to change the general form of the equation that's given to us into standard vertex form. So we have y equals x squared plus 2x minus 8. Now what we need to do is create a perfect square trinomial, and we do this by dividing the middle number 2 here. We first divide that by 2. If you divide 2 by 2, you get 1, and then you square 1, which will give you a positive 1. So we'll put positive 1 here, and we have to turn around and do the opposite. So if we added 1 there, we really have to turn around and subtract the 1. So that's why they have a minus here. We're going to subtract that same 1. Now that's called completing the square. Since now we have a perfect square trinomial, then what is x squared plus 2x plus 1? It is x plus 1 squared. So let's change this minus sign to a plus here. It's x plus 1 squared. And what is negative 8 minus 1? It is actually negative 9. Let's try f of x equals x squared minus 2x plus 3. So what I want you to do first is separate the 3 from the problem. What we're going to do now is something called completing the square. So we're going to divide the b of this problem, which is 2, but divided by 2. So always divide the b by 2. Put this information over here, and we're going to square it. Okay? So this is a side note. So we have f of x equals x squared minus 2x, and once we divide 2 by 2 we get 1, and we square it, we get a positive 1. But since we added 1 in this case, we're going to turn around and subtract 1 to balance it out, because we can't just add a number to one side of the equation without balancing. So we had to subtract the 1. Now let's look at x squared minus 2x plus 1. Because we completed the square, it should now be a perfect square trinomial. So f of x equals something squared, and then we have 3 minus 1. We know that's going to be a positive 2. So basically now we have to factor x squared minus 2x plus 1. Usually it's pretty easy. We know that it's going to be x. We know that the square root of 1 here is 1. And what would make that minus sign in the middle? It would be a minus sign here. And you can always check to see if this is right by FOILing out. So let's check x minus 1 squared. That'll give us x minus 1 times x minus 1, which is x times x is x squared, x times negative 1 is negative x, this negative 1 times x is negative x, and then we have a negative 1 times negative 1, which is positive 1. That gives us x squared. We have like terms in the middle, minus 2x plus 1. Alright, so that gives us that x squared minus 2x plus 1, and of course 3 minus 1 is 2. Now, since we have this nice form, the standard form of a quadratic, we can do a lot of things with this standard form. We can graph this using transformations. We can pick out the vertex, the minimum and maximum point, and we can pick out the x-intercepts from this, also the line of symmetry. So let's get started on that. So what is A here? A is 1. Okay. And let me go ahead and rewrite what the standard form is. It's f of x equals a times x minus h squared plus k. So obviously a is 1 since you don't see a coefficient, so it's considered to be 1 here. Next, what is the vertex? The vertex again is represented by hk. And now we also like to say opposite keep. Opposite keep. So the vertex is, so we do the opposite of what you see here. It's going to be 1. And we keep that number that we see here, which is 2. Next, the axis of symmetry. Is x equals h. So always make sure you put the x equals. Do not just say what the h is. We already figured out that the h is 1, so we just rewrite 1 back over. It's important that you put x equals 1 because x equals a number represents a vertical line. If you just gave it the number 1, it doesn't represent a line. It just represents the number 1. Okay, now since a equals 1, I wanted to also mention, because a is greater than 0, then our parabola opens up. It'll open up. Because it opens up, we have a minimum point, which is also our vertex. And that vertex or that minimum point occurs at 1, 2. Okay, let's attempt to graph using the standard form. We have f of x equals x minus 1 squared plus 2. We see that we will have a horizontal translation of 1 to the right. So you, from the origin, you'll go over 1 to the right, and then you'll go up 2. So we're here. Notice also that this is the vertex. Alright, so we go. If I say sketch, all I want you to do is from that vertex, just sketch a parabola. Also notice that the axis of symmetry will go right down the center of that parabola, and it is x equals 1. This is also called the minimum point. Okay, moving on. Which is f of x equals 2x squared minus 8x plus 6. Okay, now what we first need to do is factor out the a in this problem. The a is 2. We need to factor out the 2 only from the first 2 terms, okay, not from the 6. So let's factor out the 2. Take the 2 out, we have x squared minus 4x, and then we're going to put this plus 6 out to the side. Now we're going to complete this square within this parenthesis. So I'm going to make my parenthesis a little bit bigger. I'm going to write x squared minus 4x again, but now I'm going to divide the b part of this parenthesis by 2. Okay, so again, a side note, we're dividing the b by 2 and we're going to square it. In this case, b is 4. We're going to divide it by, or negative 4. Divided by 2, you get negative 2, but you square it, it's going to end up being positive anyway. So we're going to add 4 here. But here's what you have to realize. We're not really just adding 4 to this equation. Because it's inside this parenthesis here, and it's also connected to the 2 on the outside of the parenthesis, we're really adding 8 to this problem. So we're going to have to go back and do the opposite of plus 8, and we're going to have to subtract 8. Okay? Now, let's finish by completing the square. So we have 2. This should be a perfect square trinomial now. It is x. Can you guess what it is inside the parentheses? It's minus 2. And then we have 6 minus 8, which is minus 2. Okay, in this problem, a equals 2, so it opens up. the vertex opposite keep HK. So we do positive 2, negative 2. The axis of symmetry is x equals h. In this case, h is 2. And let's do a small graph over to the side. We know we're going to do a horizontal translation 2 to the right, and we're going to go down. Put our vertex right here, 2, negative 2. That's our minimum point. What does this 2 tell me here? This 2 tells me that it will be a vertical stretch. This meaning it gets closer to the y-axis. So it gets closer together. A little bit thinner than we normally will graph. Okay? F of x equals negative x squared plus 6x minus a. Again, we have an a that is not 1, so we need to factor out the a. In this case, a is negative 1, so we have to factor it out of the first 2 terms. So negative x squared, what would this sign have to be to make this plus up here? It would have to be a minus 6x. And we're going to take out this negative 8 and put it to the side. Now let's rewrite this, and we're going to make a bigger parenthesis, and we're going to complete the square. So we're going to divide the 6 here, or the negative 6, by 2. You get negative 3, but when you square it, it's going to be a positive 9 anyway. So let's put our plus 9 inside of here. But since this 9 is connected to this negative here, we really just did a minus 9 technically. So in order to balance this out, we have to do the opposite. Since it's minus 9 or negative 9, we're going to turn around and put a plus 9. Okay, so let's complete the square. We have negative. This should be a perfect square trinomial now. So it's something squared. Alright, so it's x, square root of 9 is 3. And to get that minus sign, we need a minus here. And then we're going to finish by adding negative 8 plus 9, which is plus 1. So this is our standard, I'm going to call it the standard vertex form. Alright, what is our a here? Our a is negative 1. Does it open up or down? It opens down, because negative 1 is less than 0. Our vertex is HK. We're gonna do the opposite and then keep. So opposite, what do we see here? We're gonna put a positive 3 and keep what we see here, positive 1. What is our axis of symmetry? It is x equals h. We've just figured out that h was 3. So x equals 3. Now, let's do a little sketch of what we see. You should, if I ask you to sketch it, then I just want you to do what I'm doing now. But if I ask you to graph it, I do want you to go further and plug in more points so that you'll be more accurate. Now I know that my graph will open down this time, so when I go to the right 3, 1, 2, 3, and I go up, when I put my point here, my parabola should be going down. We have f of x equals negative 2x squared plus x minus 1. Here a is negative 2, so we need to factor it out of the first 2 terms. So negative 2 times x squared. Now if we factor out a negative 2 from a 1, you're going to end up with a fraction. So what times negative 2 will give you back positive x? It will have to be a negative, since negative times negative is positive, but it would have to be the fraction 1/2. We're going to put our minus 1 out to the side. So go back and check that. Negative 2 times everything in this parenthesis should give you back negative 2x squared plus x. Alright, now let's complete the square. We have x squared minus 1/2 x. Now we have to divide this negative 1/2 by 2. Negative 1/2 by 2. This is negative 1/4. And then we have to square it. We get 1/16. Now, if you have issues with that, you can always do negative 1/2 divided by 2 is the same thing as negative 1/2, project the division symbol 2. We know that 2 is the same thing as 2/1. So we can do negative 1/2 times, we keep change flip here, we flip the 2/1 to 1/2, and we get that negative 1/4. And then you can square that number and get 1/16. Okay? Now that we got that 1/16, we're going to add it. And let me put it in red. We're going to add that 1/16. Now that 1/16 is connected to negative 2. Now if you multiply a negative 2 times 1/16, it's going to become negative 1/8. Since it's a negative 1/8, we're going to turn around and put plus 1/8. Alright, so we have negative 2, something squared. We know it's going to be x. We should know now, since that middle sign is minus, it's going to be minus. But what's the square root of 1/16? Square root of 1 is 1. Square root of 16 is 4. So it's 1. A negative 1 plus 1/8. Of course, that negative 1 is the same thing as negative 1/1. So the LCD is 8. So we're going to have to multiply 1 times 8 and the top times 8. That multiply top and bottom by 8. You now have a negative 8/8 plus 1/8, which gives you negative 7/8. So plus, well, minus 7/8. Now what is our A? Our A is negative 2, so we know that our parabola opens down. Our vertex is HK. We're going to do the opposite, and we're going to keep. Opposite, keep. H and K. Next, let's find our axis of symmetry. It's always x equals something. So x equals 1/4 here, since 1/4 is h. We'll do a little sketch here on the side over here. We should go to the right 1/4, and let's say that was 1 here. 1/4, and you can put this in your calculator, of course, is a 0.25, so it should be a quarter of the way to the right. So we'll stop here somewhere, and then you have negative 7/8. Now let's say that was negative 1 down here. Now we will go down really close to that negative 1. Okay, and since our parabola opens down, we'll just sketch it like so. F of x equals x squared plus 3x plus 2. Here we don't have an A, but let's complete this square. We got an x squared plus 3x, and I'm going to put the plus 2 out to the side. Let's divide the middle number by 2. 3 divided by 2 is 3/2. Alright, so 3 divided by 2 is 3/2, but when we square it, we get 9/4. So x squared plus 3x, let's put plus 9/4 here. We have a plus 2, but we're going to turn around and subtract 9/4 to balance it out. Now, what is x squared plus 3x plus 9 fourths? When we factor it, it is x. We got a plus sign in the middle here, so plus. What's the square root of 9 over 4? Square root of 9 is 3. Square root of 4 is 2. And then we're dealing with a fraction here. We have 2 minus 9 over 4. Of course, that 2, put a 1 under it. What's the LCD now? It is 4. So we multiply that 1 times 4. And of course, we have to multiply the numerator by 4 as well. So we have 8 minus 9 over 4, which is negative 1/4.